Week 1, Sunday main slate is right around the corner, and I cannot wait to sit on my couch, watch Red Zone all day long. Welcome, guys. My name is DK, and in this video, I can break down the Week 1 main slate here on Draftkings. You got $1 million up top in multiple different tournament formats. If this is your first time watching cover content for daily fantasy sports, as well as for player prop stuff like prize picks, underdog, parlay play, straight betting, all that good stuff. Underdog, they're the sponsor of today's video. You can use the link down below for a $1,000 deposit match bonus, or you can use the code DKDFS. Would highly recommend it. They have a ton, and I mean a ton of NFL props posted, so go ahead and check that out. And if you do click the link and deposit, it does really help support the channel. If you guys want to look for more content, you can check my Patreon linked in the description. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. And let's just go team by team, kind of talk about... I think that'll be easier for week 1 to go team by team. And then maybe we can switch it up and go position by position next week. We'll start off here with the first game. We got Pittsburgh and we got Atlanta. So Russell Wilson not expected to play, which is going to immediately make Justin Fields one of the top value plays on the slate. He's expected to be relatively popular looking across the industry. $5K for a guy that is mobile. Definitely firmly in play for cash games. Definitely you can look to him in tournaments as well. Like I said, I think he's one of the more mispriced players on the slate, assuming that Wilson does not play. And like I said, it's looking like Russell Wilson right now will not play. At the running back position, you still have Najee and you still have Jalen Warren. Expecting a relatively even split. I do think the Steelers' offensive line did get better this year, so that's a slight upgrade there to the two running backs. Looking at the wide receiving group, pretty gross wide receiving room here for the Steelers. Outside of George Pickens, it's like, okay, where are they going to throw the ball, right? They got Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin as the other receivers. So I do think Pickens is interesting for that reason of just like there's not a lot of talent kind of in the wide receiving room, and at tight end, Freiermuth is fine. I think there's better value plays in the slate, but he should still be running a good amount of routes there for Pittsburgh. Let's move on to Atlanta. So Atlanta, Kirk Cousins 6.1K, kind of just indifferent on him. Not expected to be popular, but I do think this Falcons offense is going to be an upgrade with him running the show offensively. Bijan Robinson is expected to be one of the more popular plays at the running back position. And I think that makes sense, right? He is a guy that we're expecting him to be a bell cow this year. He's a great pass catcher as well. So, Bijan looks good in both formats. Again, he's going to be popular. Looking at the wide receiver position, another guy that's expected to be relatively popular is going to be Drake London, 6K. Also, I think a bit of a misprice here, again, especially with the upgrade there at quarterback. Darnell Mooney, I think, is a reasonable kind of contrarian value play. I didn't have the best year last year, but I do think he is getting a upgrade here at quarterback. So I think Mooney's interesting. And then another guy that's expected to be pretty popular in the tight end position is Kyle Pitts, right? So Atlanta's expected to be pretty popular across the board. You got Bijan Robinson is expected to be chalk, Drake London's expected to be chalk, and Kyle Pitts is expected to be chalk. So, and I agree. I think a lot of the main guys are underpriced here for the Falcons. Move on to Carolina. I do think Bryce Young's going to have a better year this year as he did last year, but not a ton of interest in him week 1. Looking at the running back position, expecting Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders to be the top two backs here. I think Chuba will be RB1, but neither really stand out to me. At the wide receiver position, you got Deontay Johnson at the top of 5.3K. I think he's a pretty solid option. Should be the top target here for the Panthers. Obviously, Adam Thielen had a big year last year. Kind of cooled off there down the stretch. He's reasonable. Hopefully my computer can stop freezing. Moving on to tight end. So you do have a viable punt play here in Jatavion Sanders, the rookie. Expecting him to be their top tight end. He's a decent pass catcher as well. So if you want to punt the tight end position, I think you could do worse. I think Sanders is a reasonable play there. Moving on to New Orleans, Derek Carr is relatively cheap. It's a good matchup. I think there's probably better values, which we'll talk about. But one guy that is expected to be relatively popular is going to be Alvin Kamara. I think it does make sense. Jamal Williams, I think, is pretty dusty behind him. Panthers defense, not great. Kamara, very involved in the passing game as well. So, definitely a cash game viable play here for sure. Kamara does stand out. He's going to get some ownership for good reason. At the wide receiver position, the top two guys didn't look decent here with Olave and Rashid Shaheed. Olave 6.6K, kind of in that mid-range. Might go a little bit overlooked. We do have some, top end guys that maybe are a bit underpriced. Some guys below him, I think, are a little bit underpriced as well, but love the upside there in Olave. And then Rashid Shaheed, I think, is a reasonable value play as well. Like I said, outside of those two, there's not much behind them. So not a super talented wide receiving group here for the Saints. So those top two guys should be getting a good amount of targets. At the tight end position, they're probably going to rotate guys here. Juwan Johnson's going to be the top receiving tight end. You're going to get Taysom Hill, though. I mean, he's going to get some carries. He's going to play some quarterback. He can catch some passes. If you want to take a shot at him for tournaments, fine. Obviously, the price is not amazing at 4.3K, but you're just going to get some gadget Taysom Hill plays in there for sure. Moving on to Arizona and Buffalo. This is one of my favorite games to target for tournaments. Surprisingly, not a lot of ownership going to this game right now, and I disagree with it. I really like this game. Kyler Murray, if you guys have been watching my channel for a while, you guys know I'm a big fan of Kyler Murray. I think this game has shootout potential written all over it. Expect the Cardinals to play fast here. Murray is mobile as well, and is coming in at a reasonable price point. So, I'm pretty high there in Kyler Murray. At the running back position, I think James Conner is fine, 6.2K. Did have a really good year last year, was a bell cow back. We'll see if he's still going to be a bell cow there with Benson behind him. But I think Conner's a reasonable running back play. And then at the wide receiver position, I like the upside a lot on the rookie Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously, I don't think you get to him in a cash game setting, but the ceiling is pretty high. And if you take a look at the depth chart behind him, you got Michael Wilson, you got Greg Dortch. I think Dortch is an okay punt play. We've seen him when he gets run out of the slot. Dortch has a relatively high floor. And then tight end, I'm pretty high on Trey McBride coming into this year. I think he's gonna have a big year. Look at what he did kind of down the stretch last year. Now, obviously, that was without Marvin Harrison Jr., but still expecting a good amount of targets here for Trey McBride. So, yeah, pretty high in this Cardinals offense, and I'm pretty high in this Bills offense as well. Looking at the ownership, this is a team that I really like for tournaments. I'm surprised they're not getting more ownership. I think Josh Allen, probably my favorite tournament play of the slate here, 8K. We know he's mobile. Arizona defense, not scared of them at all. And so I'm pretty high on Josh Allen here for GPPs. James Cook coming in as their lead back at 6.9K. We kind of saw Buffalo been rotating backs throughout the years. I do think Cook is going to get a good chunk of these snaps at running back. Behind him, you got Davis and Ty Johnson. So I just don't love the price point on Cook. More in play for tournaments. At the wide receiver position, I'm pretty high on Khalil Shakir. Like I said, we don't have Stephon Diggs. We don't have Gabe Davis anymore. It's like you're looking at this wide receiving room here for the Bills. You got Shakir, Deion Coleman, and Curtis Samuel, who I think is kind of dusty at this point in his career, but still an okay receiver. But yeah, I think those top two, Shakir and Coleman, look pretty good at their respective price points. Looking at ownership, again, I have a few different sites pulled up. Like the Bills, not projected to be very popular here. Both Shakir and Keon Coleman basically projected for like no ownership. So again, this is where I disagree from the field here. I am much higher on this Bills team. And I really like Dalton Kincaid too. I drafted one season-long team this year. I got Kincaid. I think, last year we kind of saw a split there with him and Knox. They ran a lot of two tight end stats, but this year I'm expecting Kincaid to take a big leap forward. I think he's going to be one of the top tight ends overall in the NFL. So I'm really high in Kincaid. Also not projecting for a ton of ownership, which does surprise me. Tennessee and Chicago. So I'm expecting Tennessee to be a bit better offensively this year. Will Levis, QB1, somewhat mobile. Just more of a contrarian play for me. At the running back position, kind of hard to prioritize either. You're expecting a pretty even split here with Pollard and with Spears. At the wide receiver position, we'll keep an eye on the DeAndre Hopkins news. Obviously, if he's out, that would upgrade Ridley. If both are in, I think both are okay plays. If Hopkins is out, that would make me like Ridley a little bit more. No real strong take there in Chigo Kongwu at 3.9K. Just kind of indifferent on him. Moving on to Chicago. So Chicago expected to obviously be a lot better this year offensively. We got the rookie and Caleb Williams at 5.9K. I like the ceiling quite a bit on him. Big upgrade at wide receiver this year for the Bills. So for the Bears. So I think Caleb Williams at this price point, not expected to be super popular. Like the upside of him quite a bit. At the running back position, you got DeAndre Swift and then Khalil Herbert. I'm expecting Swift to get a majority of the snaps, maybe like a 70-30 split or something like that. 6K, reasonable price point, not expected to get insane ownership. And then the wide receiver position, you got Keenan Allen, you got DJ Moore, you got Rume, or you got Odunze. I think obviously that if if I just had to pick one wide receiver, not factoring in salary, would be DJ Moore. But when you factor in salary, a 4K Odunze does look somewhat appealing. So I think he's a solid value play. Again, if you're going to spend up, I think I prefer DJ Moore to Keenan Allen. But Keenan Allen, even though he's getting up there in age, still think he's a solid receiver. And then the tight end position, you got Kmet, you got Everett. Probably not going to be going there. Moving on to New England. So New England, we're going to get Jacoby Brissett starting week 1. Pass on that. Running back position, you got Stevenson and Gibson. Still expect Stevenson to be the RB1, but I do think Gibson will mix in. Stevenson more of just a contrarian play. At the wide receiver position for the New England Patriots, so you got a lot of young guys. You got Douglas and Polk as the top 2 receivers there. 4.8K for Douglas, 3.9 for Polk. And then you got the veteran and KJ Osborne in there. Not really interested in Osborne, but I do think that factoring in, looking at the salaries, I think Douglas and Polk are viable value options. And then the tight end position, Hunter Henry, 4.2K. I think there's better values in the board, but we know the Patriots do like going to their tight end, and he should be running a lot of routes. Talk about Cincinnati. So Joe Burrow coming in at 6.5K. Feels priced about right. Not projected to be super high owned. So, no real strong takes there. We don't have T. Higgins is not expected to play, and Jamar Chase is expected to be some sort of a limit. So it's obviously a slight downgrade there to Burrow. At the running back position, I do think Moss will be the RB1, but not like a bell cow back. You got Chase Brown behind him. So I'm not super interested in either of the backs there. Looking at the wide receiver position, so this is where we're going to get massive chalk, right? With Higgins doubtful and Chase, expected to be limited. You got Yusovas is going to be probably the most popular wide receiver play in the slate, and I think it's for good reason. I think he's a talented wide receiver. I was surprised he didn't play a little bit more last year. So Yusovas is going to be massive, and I mean just massive chalk week 1. So cash games, I mean, you have to play him in tournaments. Obviously, you can get different, but and fade. But yeah, I think Yusovas looks amazing there. And if Jamar Chase ends up getting ruled out, I don't think he will. I think he will play and just be limited, but. Then, I mean, you should start looking at some of these dart throws, like the veteran Trenton Irwin. You got Burton, you got Charlie Jones back there. So we'll see. But yeah, Yushovas is the standout there right now. And then the tight end position, I mean, you got Mike Gesicki as their tight end 1, 3K. I mean, we know he's a decent pass catcher. I think he's a decent value option. Not expected to be super popular. Houston and Indy, this should be a fun game. We got 2 young offenses going up against each other. Expected to be a lot of offense scored in this one. CJ Stroud coming at the top at 7.5. I mean, we know the ceiling's massive on him. I think if I'm going to spend up for a quarterback at the very top for tournaments, for me, it would be Josh Allen. But I'm not going to talk you off if you want to go to CJ Stroud. He also has very talented wide receivers, so expecting a big year for this Texans offense and for CJ Stroud. Joe Mixon expected to be the RB1, 6.6K. I think you'll see some Dameon Pierce mix in. I don't think Mixon will be a bell cow, so I don't love the price there. The wide receivers, you got Nico Collins at 7K, Stephon Diggs at 6.7, and then my boy Tank Dell at 5.5. You guys know I was all over Tank Dell at the beginning of the year when absolutely no one else was. And he had a huge year before he got injured. I mean, looking at the price points, I have interest in all 3, but I think factoring in salary, my favorite would be Tank Dell. Maybe the playing time won't be as high as last year, but I still think he's going to be out there a good chunk. I think they're going to run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, so I have interest in all 3 of the receivers, but I think Dell would be my favorite factoring in the salary. And then Schultz at 4.9K doesn't really stand out to me. Let's move on to the Colts. Anthony Richardson coming in at 6.3K. Probably going to be the most popular quarterback in cash games would be my guess. I mean, you got him, you got Fields, you got Daniels, we'll talk about in a bit. But A-Rich, 6'3", expect to be high scoring. We know how mobile he is as well. So really like the upside of him. I guess the downside of Richardson in tournaments is he's going to be popular. He's going to be very popular, but in cash games, he's probably the guy you look to right now. Looking at running back, JT, 7.8K. Let me see. Where is JT coming in ownership-wise right now? So, yeah, I think Jonathan Taylor is interesting, right? Not projected to be super popular looking across the industry. And we know that Anthony Richardson is going to be massive chalk. One way you could leverage the field is you play a low-owned Jonathan Taylor over massive chalk Anthony Richardson. And, just hope that touchdown variance goes your way and JT plows a couple in. So I think JT is a pretty interesting tournament play there. Look at the wide receivers for the Colts. So you got Pittman as the clear wide receiver 1, right? 6.8K. Obviously, you like the upside in him. No Josh Downs. So behind him, you got the rookie Adonai Mitchell and Alec Pierce. I think Adonai Mitchell 3.8K is a interesting punt play here. Without Josh Downs, again, expect him to get additional work. So I think he's reasonable value. And the Colts like rotate tight ends. So nothing I love here. I think Granson will probably be the top receiving target, 2.9K, more of just a dart throw. All right, moving on to the back end games here. We got Jacksonville, Miami. Another game is expected to be very high scoring. Like this game for tournaments as well. T-Law, 6.2K. Probably not a cash game play, but like the upside quite a bit here for tournaments. We know Jacksonville likes to air it out. We know Miami likes to air it out. Again, this game has shootout potential written all over it. So like the upside in him a good amount in tournaments. Travis Etienne, 7.2K, expecting him to be, he was a bell cow last year, expecting similar workload again for him this year. So, yeah, ownership for Etienne. He's not expected to be very popular. If people are spending up at running back, a lot of them are going to look to Bijan Robinson. But yeah, I think Etienne still a reasonable option. And then looking at the wide receiver position, for the Jags, I mean, the wide receivers are not that expensive, right? You got 5.5K for Kirk, 4.5 for Davis, and 4.7K for Brian Thomas. I think all three firmly in play here, right? A Jacksonville stack in tournaments, not that expensive, right? If you put T-Law in there, a double stack T-Law with a couple of these receivers, maybe you do something like that, right? You can run it back with like Tyreek Hill or something. That looks pretty good for GPPs, right? And then tight end, Evan Ingram's expected to be pretty popular. I think it's for good reason. I mean, he had a huge year last year, peppered with targets, and expecting another big year here for Ingram. So he looks good if you're going to spend up a tight end. Moving on to quarterback, Minnesota, you're going to have Sam Darnold running the show here offensively. I do think he's like a quality backup. Obviously, he's going to be starting this year with McCarthy out for the year. For value, though, I think we can probably do better. At the running back position, I do have some interest in Aaron Jones. The question is, what's the workload going to look like for Aaron Jones, right? Are we going to see, Ty Chandler mixing, or are we going to see Aaron Jones kind of be a bell cow? If you think Aaron Jones is going to be kind of a bell cow back, then I think he's a pretty interesting player, not expected to be very popular. At the wide receiver position, you got Justin Jefferson, obviously has a massive ceiling. If you want to spend it for wide receiver, I think he looks good. I think Tyreek Hill will be more popular. But yeah, hold on. I actually just realized I skipped over Miami. So hold on. Let's quickly talk about Miami, then we can move on. 207K, kind of the same thing I said about T-Law. I think I was going to play quarterback in this game. I slightly would prefer T-Law, though, for the discount. At the wide receiver, or at the running back position, you're going to Achane and Mostert kind of splitting the running back duties. I think Achane obviously has the higher ceiling. We saw a couple massive games from him last year. And the wide receivers, you got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle at the top. Both have a very, very high ceiling. Like the upside in both. Tyreek Hill is going to be very popular in both formats, as he should be. In the tight end position, I think they're going to kind of rotate guys. Jonnu Smith expect to be the tight end one, but I think they will rotate here. So back to Minnesota. We talked about Darnold. We talked about Aaron Jones. Wide receivers, obviously Justin Jefferson has a massive ceiling. I think Addison's a pretty solid play in the mid-range. Clear wide receiver too. Again, Hawkinson's out for a while, so I think Addison's a decent play there in the mid-range. And looking at the tight ends, you got Oliver and Munt. I think both will kind of mix in, so neither really stands out to me. Move on to the Giants. So we got Daniel Jones there at 5.4K. An okay contrarian play. Didn't look great last year, but still a guy that does have rushing upside. We know that. I think Devin Singletary is a pretty interesting contrarian play. I know it's not like a sexy click. You're not excited to click Devin Singletary, but I mean, if you looked at the game where, was it the last preseason game or the second to last preseason game where the starters played a full half? Singletary was just a bell cow. Like, he played a vast majority of the snaps at running back. So, I think later on in the year, Tracy and Gray maybe can start stealing some snaps from Singletary. But I think early on, you're going to get a lot of Singletary. So I think he's a pretty good contrarian play. At the wide receiver position, Malik Neighbors, I think is going to get a ton of targets. Again, not a super high price point there for Neighbors. I think the downside obviously is quarterback play is somewhat questionable. Again, I think Daniel Jones is reasonable, but not like an amazing quarterback. Malik Neighbors, he's going to be relatively popular, expected to be one of the more popular wide receiver plays, but I think it's for good reason. And then behind Malik Neighbors, you got Wendell Robinson, who's someone that I've been high on. Guy that will play in the slot, get a lot of those short targets. Darius Slayton, wide receiver 3, no real strong takes there. I do think Robinson's an okay punt play. And then Daniel Bellinger coming in at 3K, no real take there for me. Denver and Seattle. So you got a few games left here. You got Bo Nix going to get the start here, 5K. I think he's in play for tournaments. He looked good in the preseason. Obviously, he was playing in those preseason games against a lot of backups and third string. So we'll see how he looks against a Seahawks defense here. But Bo Nix is mobile. He's $5,000, and he's not expected to be super popular. So definitely have some interest there. At the running back position, I do think Javonte Williams is interesting at 5.5. So we'll see what the workload is. Obviously, you got McLaughlin behind him. But I do think early on, you could see a good amount of Javonte Williams. And then looking at the wide receivers here for Denver. So no one's super expensive. You got Sutton, wide receiver 1, then Josh Reynolds, then Marvin Mims. Obviously, Mims was frustrating last year. I think he's talented. Just like the snaps weren't really there for him. I think Sutton is a okay play there, kind of at the top end for Denver. I don't think he'll get that much ownership either. And then looking at tight ends for Denver, I think they're going to rotate guys at tight end, but top tight end is Troutman. And then you got Dulcich and Kroll behind him. All right, moving on to Seattle. So Geno Smith, 5.5. Think there's better quarterback values. Running back, I do think Kenneth Walker is a pretty good play there at 6.1K. So there's been some talk about him getting a bigger workload this year. Obviously, he was still the RB1 last year for the Seahawks, but you did see Charbonnet kind of mix in behind him. So Walker at a reasonable price point, decent pass catcher as well. If that is correct and he gets a bigger workload this year, then he's going to be a pretty good player at 6.1. Looking at the wide receiver position, obviously for Seattle, it's always a tough decision picking between Metcalf and Lockett. I feel like over the years, I always choose wrong. Then you got JSN working in the slot there at 4.9. I think he will have a nice second year as well. Tight end position, Noah Fant, 4K. Move on to the Raiders and the Chargers. The Raiders, I will pass on Minshew. I mean, again, I think he's a decent backup quarterback, but should he be a starter in this league? Zamir White, though, at 5.7, he's not expected to get much ownership. I think he could be in for a pretty big year here. I do. We saw him kind of play behind Jacobs for a while. When he did get opportunities, though, Zamir White made the most of them. So relatively cheap price point. I do like Zamir White. He's not expected to be that popular. At the wide receiver position, we got the top two guys returning here, Devonta Adams and Jacoby Myers. It was a pretty condensed target share last year with those two guys. I think factoring in salary, I might slightly prefer Myers to Adams, but both those guys are in play. And then you got the rookie and Brock Bowers. I think fine tournament option. Super talented tight end. So yeah, he's in play for GPPs. Moving on to the Chargers. This is one of my favorite teams to target here for tournaments. So Herbert is 5.8K. Should be good to go. Obviously, he's a little bit banged up there in the preseason, but I kind of like him for tournaments. At the running back position, I'm expecting a split here with Edwards and Dobbins, so not a ton to love there. But the wide receivers are where I have interest here, and there's not really much ownership going here at all. So those top two guys are where I have a good amount of interest here, in Josh Palmer and in McConkey. So again, we have no more Keenan Allen and no more Mike Williams. So a ton of targets to go around, and we know that Justin Herbert likes to air it out. Obviously, a different coaching staff this year with Harbaugh moving in, but still Palmer and McConkey, I think, are decent plays. They're neither expected to be very popular. Quentin Johnston, I'll pass on him, but I think those top two are pretty interesting options. Looking at the tight end position, I think they will rotate guys, so not a ton to love there. Final couple games here, Dallas and Cleveland. Dak Prescott, 7K. Tough matchup. I'll pass on him. At the running back position, there's kind of uncertainty of what's going to happen here for Dallas. You got the complete dust in Zeke Elliott. You got dusty Dalvin Cook. There's been reports that Rico Dowdle, some beat writers think Rico Dowdle will lead the team in RB snaps. If you have a strong inclination of what's going to happen here for Dallas, you can take some shots here. But for me, I think it's going to be a stay away. At the wide receiver position, obviously CeeDee Lamb has a massive ceiling. Not expect to be very popular. I'll pass on Brandon Cooks. And then Jake Ferguson feels a little pricey there at 5.2. So not a ton that I love there for Dallas. Moving on to Cleveland, Deshaun Watson, 6K. I think in play for tournaments. Obviously, tough matchup here as well. At the running back position, obviously, Nick Chubb's going to be out for a bit. So Jerome Ford, I'm expecting him to get a good amount of the work here. We saw what he could do last year when he was the RB1. So a guy that's not expected to get a ton of ownership. I think a pretty good play there in the mid-range. Top wide receivers here, Mark Cooper, Jerry Jeudy. No real strong takes on either of them. And the tight end position, David Njoku, 5.6. Had a big year last year. Expecting him to run a lot of routes again this year. But again, that price point is up. I think if I'm going to spend up for tight end, I would rather go to like Kincaid or Trey McBride. And then finally, we got Washington and we got Tampa Bay. So I do think Washington could be kind of a fun team this year. You got the rookie in Jane Daniels, expected to be relatively popular. He's cheap. He's mobile. Yeah, I think he's a solid option here. As I said, Washington, I think, could be a pretty fun team to watch this year. So I definitely have some interest there in Jaden Daniels. Looking at the running backs here, so expecting Robinson, Eckler to be somewhat of an even split. I think Robinson will get a bit more of the early down work. Eckler a bit more of the pass down situations. At the wide receiver position, a pretty gross wide receiver position outside of Terry McLaurin. So expect him to get peppered with targets. I like him there in the mid-range. You got McCaffrey and Noah Brown, I believe, as the other top receivers. Zacchaeus, Noah Brown, and McCaffrey as the secondary receivers there. So again, I think you're going to get a lot of targets there for Terry McLaurin. I do think it's gross. It's a gross play here, but I kind of like Zach Ertz at 3.6. You got the rookie and Senat behind him, but there's just not, like, they don't have a ton of talent with pass catchers. And even though Ertz is getting up there in age, I mean, he still had a decent year last year once he got traded to the Cardinals. Yeah, he can still put up some decent numbers, still a decent pass catcher. So I do have some interest there in Dusty Zach Ertz. Finally, Tampa Bay, Baker Mayfield, 5.6. Again, more of just contrarian dart throw. Now, this one is interesting to me. Rachaad White is expected to be massive chalk, and I mean just massive chalk. And there's conflicting reports here for what's going to happen with this Tampa Bay running back room. Some are saying, okay, it's going to be Rachaad White. He's still going to be the clear RB1. And some are going to say they're going to go the hot hand with Bucky Irving behind him, the rookie. So in a situation like this where there's a little bit of uncertainty and the field is just super confident it's going to go one way, right? Rachaad White is expected to be the highest on running back play of the slate. For me, I think that's a bad play in tournaments, and I'll be fading. If you want to play him in a cash game's fine. If he gets there at massive ownership for the slappies, then congrats to them. But for me, I think when you have a situation like this where there is some uncertainty and the field is just assuming it's going to go one way, they're just assuming Rachaad White's going to be a clear RB1 and get all the work. That's a spot where I'm going to fade. Regardless of the outcome, I will always fade in a spot like that. So again, I think he's fine for cash, but I think he's going way over-owned in tournaments. Like looking across the industry, Rachaad White's projecting for like around 30% ownership, which I think is pretty insane. Top two receivers here, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. No real strong takes in either of them. 7.3 for Evans, 5.8 for Godwin. And then you got tight end one, Kate Otten, feels priced about right there at 3.8. All right, guys, so that's the team-by-team breakdown. That's going to do it for week one. I will have a Monday night video posted for the showdown slate, probably Sunday night, so be on the lookout for that. Other than that, good luck if you do enjoy. Just make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and we'll see you guys all in the next video.